In our high-speed, interconnected world with global travel, the fear of an international epidemic outbreak is always looming. We have already had a taste of the deadly powers of the bird flu, H1N1, and SARS. When these outbreaks happen, we place our trust in our governments and health communities to contain the spread and protect the population. But this was not the case in the severe SARS outbreak of 2003 in China. The SARS outbreak was not handled properly there, and years later, there are hundreds, maybe thousands of people still suffering from its aftermath every day. And some of them are still fighting for justice.
他在欺上瞒下，打欺反作用。对他在里跟你起反作用。
他们在奥运会之前做出这么一个决定来，纯属就是堵住我们的嘴。
As the first global epidemic of the 21st century, severe acute respiratory syndrome swept the globe with lightning speed in 2003. It was one of the most terrifying public health crises in our time.
SARS was a one-time event. The virus that was in animals somehow mutated, either in an animal or in a human, in such a way that it became very lethal to humans and was spread very easily from human to human and caused a major epidemic.
Dr. David Heymann was executive director of the World Health Organization's Communicable Diseases programs during the SARS outbreak.
We knew that there was something going on in November 2002 because we had heard it through unofficial contacts. And GFIN as well, the Global Public Health Intelligence Network, was reporting that there was some type of an outbreak going on in Guangdong province.
GFIN, it was jointly funded, essentially, by Health Canada and WHO. At the end of November 2002, I was working in Health Canada at the time, and we were picking up reports of severe respiratory illness in Guangdong, China. When we picked up on these reports, we communicated with the WHO.
Dr. Heymann and his colleagues started getting concerned about what was going on in China.
WHO went to the government sent back a reply. One time it said it was influenza. The next time it said it was a bacterial infection and the outbreak had stopped. So WHO took that information, but still kept a watch because there were still rumors coming in formally from many different sources. Then we continued to ask, but then we got the same answer again and again. They were not reporting as much as we had hoped they would. And so there was an accusation by the Director General of the World Health Organization that they weren't reporting.
In early 2003, China was having this serious outbreak, but the WHO didn't know anything serious was occurring outside China until March the 12th. That's when they found a very severe case of a respiratory disease in Vietnam, and the person with that disease had been to Hong Kong and also to China.
So we became very concerned. We put out an alert on the 12th of March talking about a new type of disease in Asia.
Early March 2003, the SARS virus spread to Beijing. The health minister, Zhang Weikang, told the public that Beijing only had 12 cases up to March 31st, and the epidemic was under control. Beijing started to provide daily updates on SARS to the WHO on April the 3rd. Very few cases were reported.
张文康是在当时还说北京是很安全的，北京是安全的，欢迎大家的话到北京来旅游。
那个时候你们开两会，没人顾这些事情。
Life in Beijing continued as usual. Ordinary citizens were not aware anything dangerous was within their reach. Fang Bo and his wife both worked as cooks in Beijing. His 2 daughters were both happily married. The 3 couples lived together in the same place. This was the big family life they had always dreamed of. One day, Fang Bo checked his sick sister-in-law into a local hospital. They all ended up contracting SARS and gave it to the whole family.
我们当时是被无辜的在医院看病被感染的。
9 of Fang Bo's family members were quarantined and diagnosed with SARS on April 16th. His sister-in-law died from SARS on the same day.
被我隔离以后，我发现就不是那么几个人的问题了，就是很多了。
Yang Zhijia was a saleswoman in a store. She and her parents were quarantined on the same day as Fang Bo's family, April 16th. Her 6 other relatives were diagnosed with SARS over the next 2 days. Yet Beijing reported no new cases and no new deaths to the WHO on April 17th.
16号的北京报纸登的30多例，你要翻开事实，它绝对不是30多例。当时的那个佑安和地坛已经全都住满了。胸科从3月12号好像就是说我们就开始正式收非典病人了，这是胸科医院的大夫跟我说的。
On April 18th, the WHO Beijing team estimated that Beijing may have as many as 200 cases of SARS, rather than the 37 officially reported. The team recommended that Beijing improve its reporting system.
3月28号的这个有确诊了非典了，他的急诊室仍然接待普通的老百姓。说解放40多年了，说科技这么发达，能在一个首都发生这么大的疫情，说没人管。这是那天就是我们家吃的最后一顿饭，回来我记得特清楚，当时就挨这地儿，给我妈焖的饭，白炒了一什么饭，炒了一什么菜，我们5个人挨着吃完了饭。后来给我妈都穿戴好了，完了说那就上学，没人出车呀，我弟就拉着我们去那什么，要不说这串钥匙。那当时我妈就说把钥匙挂这儿吧，说咱们那个没想到我舅父母就全都没回来。我们家9个人死了4个，我爱人是5月1号死的，我弟是5月3号死的，死在厕所里了。当时说在厕所里4个小时没人管。
想我弟没有，想起我侄女，我小侄。想起我妹夫没有，想起我那外甥，他们都学生呢还。
你说明明都知道是非典，就没人说，就不告诉老百姓，非得让我们全都得趟进这个里头。
Wu Zhen was a doctor infected by the first SARS patient in her hospital.
医院也没有什么特别好的措施，就是给每个人配备了那个发2个口罩，发一次性的手套，当时还没有我们实习生的，然后我们都自己从家带的自己的口罩。
Many health workers were infected and patients were dying. Citizens' lives were at risk. Many doctors were furious over the government's cover-up. On April the 8th, 2003, a retired Army doctor, Zhang Yangyong, bravely disclosed the truth to Time magazine in the U.S. He told the press that Beijing had many more unreported SARS cases. For the first time, the world was made aware of the real scale of the epidemic in China.
Government has been criticized by some for being slow to respond at the start of the SARS crisis.
Also concerned tonight that a more virulent form of SARS may be killing younger and healthier victims in one part of Hong Kong.
Although the Chinese government still continued to hide the number of cases afterwards, world pressure had pushed the communist regime to take action. 12 days later, China fired its health minister and the mayor of Beijing.
I believe that's when they were asked to resign. It wasn't until there was clear evidence with the government that they had tried to cover up cases in military hospitals.
That very same day, the official number of infected people jumped tenfold from 37 to 339.
把一个疫情也跟政治挂钩，靠一种不对外怕引起老百姓的一种恐慌，以这个为借口，然后把疫情呢不对外进行公布，反而造成了更大的一种这个疫情的扩大。
On the 23rd of April, 2003, WHO extended its SARS-related travel advisory to include Beijing and Toronto. Canada was the hardest-hit country outside of Asia.
One of the early cases that resulted in the spread internationally was a nephrologist that left Guangzhou, who was caring for patients with SARS, and went to Hong Kong. When the nephrologist went to the Metropole Hotel, he exposed a number of individuals who eventually went back to their own countries and took the virus with them.
An infected Chinese Canadian had returned to Toronto on February the 23rd, 2003, spreading the SARS virus to family members.
We had an outbreak in the emergency department at Scarborough Grace Hospital. Our patient arrived back in Toronto February 23rd, but we didn't know there was a problem until March the 12th. If there had been more attention paid to SARS back in January or December, when it was increasing quite dramatically in Guangzhou, and you could respond appropriately, as opposed to the way we learned about it was.
44 people died from SARS in Toronto. SARS cost Ontario's healthcare system $945 million. In China, the government released figures saying 5,327 people got SARS and 349 died. In Beijing, they said 2,521 people got SARS, with 193 deaths. But there is no real way to prove the accuracy of these figures, and people dispute them.
死亡的人数肯定也不正确。武汉人的入是200几例，武汉火化的那个入馆日期是500多号，弟弟就死他后头。
Zhang Lijie, a journalist from a disability magazine in Beijing, still vividly remembers what happened back then.
在处理这个疫情爆发的过程中，比如说当时有一些信息瞒报的情况，包括有一些北京市政府的领导啊，其实当时也都被革职了，这是所有人都知道的事情。非典这件事既是一个天灾。 从某种程度上讲，它也有人祸的成分。
Thousands of people were being rushed to hospital in Beijing. The health ministry devised several medical procedures aimed at containing the outbreak, which included the controversial therapy of steroids treatment.
我是骨科，当时内外妇儿穿了白大褂就能去，在那里基本上我用不着动脑来说这个病人应该怎么治，是由方案有诊疗方案来的，方案是专家组定下来的方案。一开始什么样的体温给多少量，有些病需要用激素来进行冲击疗法，最大的量一天差不多1000毫克嘛。 一线那边已经有反映出来说，因为别人不知道，我说这样的一种情况可能会得股头坏死。
A well-known respiratory doctor, Ho Kuan-ying, wrote in the Chinese Critical Care Medicine Journal that the steroids treatment had no proper guidance. Dosages were too high, treatment periods were too long, and the treatment's consequences were not properly monitored.
High doses were not reported to the clinical working group. Well, early on, the doctors outside of China who were treating patients were regularly exchanging information about treatment. We knew that steroids were being used by many different doctors around the world, that they weren't having an effect. But China wasn't a part of those discussions at that point.
Why?
Because they had not yet reported the disease. So they couldn't benefit from the discussions that were going on internationally.
What is important, though, in particular from a Health Canada perspective, is reporting the effects of use of these drugs. One is side effects, and certainly you would want to know whether the drugs made any difference.
We didn't use high-dose steroids. I'm not aware of any information that in fact steroids was beneficial in improving the outcome.
National guidelines usually exist on how best to treat, but it's a decision of countries. WHO makes recommendations, which it was doing during SARS. If governments came to look to find out that information, it was on the website.
If we're going to use these kind of therapies, whether it was here in Toronto or whether it was in Taipei or whether it was in Beijing, is we should have been trying to determine whether or not it was beneficial. And we could have done a better job in doing that. We could have done the clinical trial very quickly.
In Beijing, the SARS epidemic was getting worse. People were starting to panic. Under enormous pressure, quickly containing the outbreak was the most critical thing to do. Despite raised concerns, aggressive steroid therapy was still their first choice, regardless of its consequences.
这个就好像在战场一样，用了激素的人呢，他呼吸道就控制了，这个感染就控制了，那么死亡率呢明显就降低。一般人可能真的没有考虑过，一般的医生。
In spite of claims coming out of China about the success of the steroids therapy, health officials in Canada remain cautious.
One of the side effects is what's called avascular necrosis, is that they impair the blood supply to the bone, to the joint, so the joint then dies because of inadequate blood supply. And these effects take long, they're not immediate. It's not like you won't see the effect of high-dose prednisone tomorrow or next week. It might be a month from now. It might be 6 weeks from now. We didn't see the kind of side effects that were seen in China where they were using high-dose steroids, the kind of problems, bone problems that resulted, unfortunately, in hip replacements, knee replacements.
Despite the controversial therapy, China told the world that Beijing had contained SARS. The WHO declared Beijing to be free of SARS on June 24, 2003. Beijing was the last city to be under a WHO travel advisory. But in less than 6 months, SARS survivors started to suffer from lung disease due to SARS and osteonecrosis caused by the steroid treatment. Worse, nobody knows the true number of people affected. According to news reports, about 1/3 of SARS patients had after effects. More than 300 have now been officially identified, but the number may be in the thousands.
有些有呢，我们没看到，病人本身自己呢，也没来找。
In China, the government badly needed a hero to lift the national spirit, which was recovering from the major epidemic of SARS. Fang Bo fit the role. Even though his whole family got SARS and his wife had died from it, as a survivor, Fang Bo was still very thankful. He donated his blood and planned to donate his organs as a thank you to society. Fang Bo was hopeful for his future. Fang Bo was hailed as a hero. The media throughout the country reported his stories. He was flooded with letters and flowers from the public. But just 6 months later, he too was diagnosed with severe osteonecrosis and needed to have multiple operations.
这是两次的手术，还有这边，还有这儿，这都是，还有这个地方，这做的关节镜，包括眼睛，还大大小小的，一共5、6次吧，好几次差点有一些。 现在双肩、跟双膝，还有腰椎、颈椎，还是有很大问题，包括都是骨干死，全身关节就是大关节多部位上下肢的骨坏死。我现在心脏也出现问题。
Fangbo's 2 daughters and sons-in-law all had SARS, and all got the steroid after effects. The pain of the after effects has created much tension among them. Both of Fangbo's daughters divorced. All of Fangbo's suffering made him very depressed. He wanted to kill himself to end it all.
那不就解脱了吗？什么现在像现在什么，生不如死的这种程度。 我这是已经查出2、3年了，都是重度抑郁、重度的焦虑。原来一上那个劲头，一想不开的时候，可能就会做一些就是自己伤害自己的事儿。
我是59激素炎的，我们的体质都是超常的。
Like Fangbo, Wang Li Gang had multiple operations. All his family members got SARS, and all got the steroid after effects. His whole family lost their jobs because of the after effects. Their lives took a tragic turn.
我种不了地，我走道都走不利索，我怎么去种地？
His wife has a psychological problem because of the abortion she had when she got SARS. She was 7 months pregnant. The doctor told them that the baby wouldn't be healthy because his wife was in a coma and she took many medications. Later, Wang and his wife decided to have an abortion.
等我媳妇一瞧是一男孩，你那也受不了，给我弄一个癫痫。 这农村又有重男轻女的一种想法，说发明就发明。我眼瞧着二。过了啊。现在。 还不如死了，痛快。捡这个都是装着的，全不是这不是，就这个。
全都这样，1个月就吃完了。感冒了，有点冷的。哎，行嘞。小朋友叫什么呀？叫什么呀？我也。你喜欢玩小车呀？
但是现在就我孩子没辙，这孩子吧，腿还挺低，为了孩子将就着吧，熬着吧。
The future of this young frontline health worker is also very grim. She's already replaced her left hip and now she needs to replace her right hip.
这以后怎么生活呀？
Being a doctor, saving people's lives had always been her dream, but now it seems impossible for her to be a doctor again. Her boyfriend also left her, and she's been single ever since.
他觉得还不如当初就是非典的时候就死了算了，那时候就是想活过来，觉得现在活过来了，就是我受罪。
The SARS survivors' suffering also tortures those close to them.
160.
Lung Mai didn't get SARS, but she couldn't escape its curse. When her husband, Wang Yonghong, got SARS, she was very supportive. It was her love that kept her husband alive during the SARS outbreak.
但你放心，你一定能活着出来。
这件事情呢，就是可以说给汪萌带来一个沉重的打击吧。因为毕竟他得非典的时候那年是43岁，查出骨头坏死的时候44岁，也正当年对于男人来说做事业做生活。他回来的时候还想计划一下新生活，碰了那么大的不幸，起码万幸他从死亡那个 SARS 的魔掌中出来了。
For 7 years, she was a caretaker and a nurse for him.
汪萌查出骨坏死的时候，我就觉得汪萌也觉得天塌了。
龙梅当时非常坚强，他说：“他说汪没事。”他说：“你瘫了，我推你。”
Both the physical and emotional pain from the steroid after effects have ruined his hope for life.
努力啊，考到北京大学，出来以后就是想自己干一番事业，正好自己呢能干事业的时候，一下子自己呢恰恰自己呢什么事情干不了。
非典出院以后，他判若两人一样。
什么人都往上面扯的话，就是
不是扯呀，你，哎妈，怎么是扯呢？哎，我不明白你怎么就扯呢？
自己肚子有一肚子的火，啊，感到自己的话就是很郁闷。那么这种火的话，你没地方朝别的地方发，然后呢，就把原来的跟前期上的一种小的矛盾啊，什么东西啊，就开始放大。
After several years, his apathy and his self-loathing became unbearable, even for his closest and strongest supporter.
出院以后就像死人一样。那么后来我又离婚了，你兑现不了。 之所以离婚了，是因为我承受不了了。你看我们又没有孩子，他父母都去世了，然后我又跟他离婚了，他等于说什么都没有了。
She continued to look after Wang until she met John online, her American husband-to-be.
Hello, sweetheart. You come home or no? Still office? Well, I'm still in school, but I. 我跟娇是在网上认识的。我在网上泡了很多年，泡了4年。我就想找一个没人了解我的地方，过我自己的下半辈子。
现在我也觉得呢，因为我对不起我前妻。
All their joy over surviving SARS turned into despair because they weren't warned about the steroid after effects during the treatment.
从来没人就是告诉我们，就是激素会对这个骨坏死造成的这个东西的一些后果。
Many health workers who were affected by SARS were aware of the after effects caused by the steroid treatment. In early 2004, the Beijing Health Bureau called the health worker to ask them to check themselves for the after effects. But for those SARS survivors who were not health workers, they suffered a different fate.
到非典这个结束之后，有很多的医学专家都在说，要注意这个骨头坏死等等这些问题。即使我们最后我们自己发现骨头坏死的时候，我们找到市政府的时候，市政府还矢口否认，本来在非典上面已经失误了，教训过去以后，刚刚半年还没到，然后在非典后遗症这方面又重蹈覆辙。
SARS survivors started to get together. They demanded an answer from the government. Starting in 2004, the SARS survivors tried to get their medical records from during the SARS outbreak. But these records had already become a secret.
我们现在拿不了病历，这是政府，有这个文件嘛，说是我们的病历是封存着的，个人没有权利去看病历嘛。
Fighting for their justice, they started to write letters to petition the government. They also wrote a long letter to then Premier Wen Jiabo, President Hu Jintao, and to the Health Minister and media, but they heard nothing. The group then took action to try and gain the attention of the government. They went to the municipal government and the petition center. Their persistent actions caught the eyes of the Western media.
我们没有得到任何的这种反馈，一直在2005年的2月8号，我们给北京市长王岐山写了一封公开信，完了被法新社给报了以后，完了市政府跟北京市卫生局才关注这件事儿。
The Beijing Health Bureau eventually issued the documents in June 2005.
目前政府已经确定的跟 SARS 这个病，或者说因为得了 SARS 以后引起后遗症有关系呢，除了骨坏死以外，就是肺纤维化，还有呢就是抑郁症。
They selected more than 100 SARS survivors and appointed certain hospitals to provide free medical care for bone, joint, and lung problems. But by then, most of the patients were already disabled. According to a survey done by 2 university students, 80% of SARS survivors lost their jobs, and 60% of the families affected by SARS have broken up. And many survivors who were not on the selected list still have to pay their own medical fees.
非典呢，只是家族性的，得完之后，它还有后续的。你手术完了以后，家里都没有人来照料，连那个护工都请不起。再加上很多人的话，将来的生活问题，有一些人很年轻，怎么办？所以一系列的问题呢，导致我们呢不得不呢，就是还继续上访。
来人了。
The officer from the Beijing Petition Center prevented any more filming.
说什么？有人问你，我也不知道说什么。
因为没有引起足够的重视，我就一家一家就开始去访问。
看别人工作特别羡慕，看别人走路也特别羡慕。
Lung Mei interviewed more than 20 people. They made 13 DVDs and then sent them to the Beijing municipality. Again, they didn't get any replies. In 2008, all the world's eyes are on China. China wanted to show the world its best image, an open, prosperous, and stable country. 20 days before the 2008 Olympic Games, the ministry extended the benefits package to selected SARS survivors. Coverage was $626 per year for the employed and $1,252 per year for the unemployed. Zhao Liming had to close down his communications company after he got SARS, suffering a huge loss. He goes to the petition center regularly.
他们在奥运会之前做出这么一个决定来，纯属就是堵住我们的嘴。
要不是因为2008年奥运会，他们能那么着急给他弄就弄成这样吗？即便是那样，他也就这样稀里糊涂，他没接触到实质问题。
市政府当时还在反反复复的强调，说你们必须按照我国现有的法律法规来解释这些问题。
In 2011, the SARS survivors eventually found the official documents, number 84, issued by the Health Ministry in April 2003. The documents clearly state SARS is a contagious disease, which qualified the victims for compensation. But the local Beijing Health Bureau says otherwise.
有官员在跟我们谈话的时候说是国家给他定调是属于突发性自然灾害，不属于公共卫生事件。
So the local government has a reason to refuse giving compensation to the victims according to the related policies. The survivors package pre-Olympics was not based on these policies.
我们是个普通老百姓，我们不知道这个文件，但是你卫生部门是应该知道的。
为什么有法不依啊？咱们只被他们骗了这么多年，蒙了这么多年，
蒙了咱们这么多年。
这就是都是国家公务员都干的这种事儿。
那次不是一去吗？一个人跟人一警察，完了呢，每个人一人填一张表，不是写上自个儿的家庭住址，你住哪儿的，或者你有单位的。我们说我们都没单位，我们现在病着呢。
身份证号码
啊，
我都给写下来了。
完了跟着我那个第二天，我们那警察就找我啊，你跟着，我说我都他妈瘸子拐子了，我闹什么事儿啊？别把你当法轮功给抓起来。
在当时他们就开始蒙骗了，那么在对待非典后遗症这个问题上，他继续蒙骗。就在我们不断上访的过程当中，他继续蒙骗我们。
All the stories about the SARS survivors group were barely allowed to be reported in the media before 2009. Chinese society hardly knows about the stories of the SARS survivors. Zhang Lijia took many photos and exhibited them in Guangzhou in 2009. She got an award for them.
这些人不停地为自己呼吁，找媒体也好，去做上访也好，还是找各种相关可以支持他们的这些条文也好、规定也好，是这样一个很慢的、很痛苦的、挺纠结的一个过程。觉得他们最大的是从情感上觉得有一种被抛弃和那种被伤害的感觉。其实这种情感上的伤害真的是用钱、用物质都不能真正弥补的。但是如果你钱多一些，你的关注多一些，就是这种心灵上的这种抚慰会好很多。
The survivors want the Health Bureau to admit SARS is a public health issue and to give compensation for their dead. They also want a lifetime disability benefit and a SARS fund to be set up.
香港是一个一国两制的国家。03年时候，人家就每个亡者家庭最高 50万元的抚恤，人建了一个基金。后来我就挺疑问的，我问过他，我说既然一个1国2制的国家都能做到，那有特色的社会主义国家，为什么没人家做得好呢？没人回答我这个问题。
因为在中国你很明显你可以看出来嘛，你同样一个事故出现的话，你中国人民就是不值钱。
这些人这么莫名其妙的被感染了，而且家里的亲人死去了，自己的腿不能动了，后半辈子都可能要躺在床上了，难道他们不应该被帮助吗？这是一定的。每年发的这4000或者8000以后，这些钱可能是不够的，就这方面可能他们是希望能够有一些政策形成条文的这样一些长期性的帮助。
我早上走送孩子，回来晚上这点接孩子，你知道我干什么？人家一看，这就是一个病包，一残疾人，谁敢接这种人？
Farmer Wang Li Gang's family lives on government welfare of about $1,800 a year. They only just survive.
俺们一家5口人勉强支撑着，因残致贫。现在我们属于太贫。
Wang Li Gang started to petition in 2004.
我从我们村里、镇里、区里一直到市里，它反正只要是非典比较特殊，我们解决不了，能往上上访吗？那我们往上上访吗？
我儿子老是拄着拐杖，拄着双拐，有时候去到北京上访。如果到下午4、5点钟不回来，我就都不知他想什么歪主意。因为他有时候也掉眼泪，爸爸，我你看我能干点什么？能挣点钱养家？我说也干不了。
In Beijing, a deeply hurt Fang Bo continued his fight for justice. But he didn't expect his fate would turn around.
我在公安榜上也算重点人物，因为我上访可能在上访期间有过激言行，他们纠正我解释，我就在北京市市政府门前，我2个坏死的乞丐往这跪了1个多小时，将近2个小时。我们当时就为了引起那个什么社会上。 跟政府的一些关注吧。上访说上趟天安门嘛，因为这个就给我们挂在公安网上了。骑自行车啊，完了到了天安门广场过了以后，2辆警车追着我呀。 就是在这个国家有重大活动的时候，可能就作为一个重点人物来监控一下。我在奥运期间，在60年大庆，我都是首都志愿者嘛，但是他们也仍然有人也在监控。这他已经严重侵犯我人权了，侵犯我人身自由了。
Fang Bo went from being a hero to being put on a government watch list because of his continuing fight for his rights.
很多人都会觉得上访是给政府啊找麻烦呀，因为在中国，比如说上访被解访、被拉回去这种事情挺多的。我觉得他们应该这样做。 国家既然有这种上访制度，它其实就是让老百姓反映自己的意愿。如果不这样，他们去找谁呢？
当时非典完了之后的话，得过的坏死，跟我前妻离婚以后，他把这房子都卖掉。有很多东西自己就说对自己的话引起一种不愉快的一种回忆。当时有一种想法什么呢？隐居到一个地方去，就那么到一个没有任何人知道我得这个病，没有任何人知道我的什么情况，就是自己到一个非常一个很陌生的一个地方去。
Wang wanted to escape such a painful place and to find peace outside Beijing. He started a new life in a rural area.
离开自己所熟悉的那个让我伤感的这种环境，我觉得就是这种躲避，没办法，努力了那么多年，然后政府就踢皮球一样。尽管解决了一些问题，但是没有从根本上解决问题。
Wang sometimes still returns to Beijing to support the petitioning. After many years, Yang is still entrenched in the darkness of the SARS epidemic. She is actively involved in the petitioning.
如果我们现在这些后遗症的人，每天都生活在这个就是疼痛之中。政府的财力什么应该做这个，绝对一点问题都没有。一个家庭妇女，按现在说，我任何力量都没有，我只能就是通过正当渠道向领导反映我现在的生活困境，我现在的身体状况。
我相信社会还有正义所在，但是起什么作用，也不一定，因为他们不是民选的政府，你现在就只能说是。期盼某种改革的到来，民营经济的发展，它一定要争一部分话语权的，但是这是一个过程，一个阶段，或者是一个很长的一个阶段才能完成的。
其实客观的说，就是中国在这个社会福利保障，包括这种突发的公共卫生事件的处理上，客观的说是没有其他的那些国家和地区那么发达。非典就是头一遭。他们这样在不断的努力，其实是在一个完全荒芜的一片区域内开创一条道路。事实证明，好像他们逐渐这么多年来一直坚持，在固定的一个时间去不断的提出一些自己的诉求，也还是取得了挺好的效果。
我们虽然自己的问题没有得到彻底解决，但是多少也推动了社会的一种进步，让政府意识到。非典这个问题，政府他意识到了自己的一些失误。
And everybody learned a lesson from SARS, including the Chinese government. So today, countries understand that they have to report even though it may cost money to their economy. Because they know that if they don't report, somebody else will report, and then they'll look very weak and very poor, and they'll be very embarrassed globally.
Ever since the SARS outbreak, China has tried hard to act on public health issues in the international arena. China was the first country in the world to develop an H1N1 vaccine in 2009. But when will China take care of its own people, the SARS survivors, who still live with serious after effects every single day?
都走了，就剩一个人。怕我自己受不了，我怕我自己扛不住了。我们正在争取，希望市里头能够给你们一个说法。